Oh, wait. Huh. Oh, OBS forgot to capture my mic. That was really annoying. Oh, well, technical difficulties. I haven't experienced like that kind of technical difficulties before, so that's new. That's new. Fun stuff. Yeah, I had an interesting, relaxing weekend. Oh, now I'm here with my tea. Yeah, the interesting part is that on Friday I finished, well, Friday and Saturday I finished the merge request that introduced the new restructured text code generator for GDBus code gen, the documentation generator, not code generator, sorry. And the end result was that the feature landed. Right. When was that? Yeah, the feature landed, and yeah, it landed 2 days ago, so landed on Saturday evening. It was really nice getting that in really quickly, so I'm happy about that. Now we can start using restructured text instead of docbook in our documentation here and there. That is a good thing. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit before I add that restructured text support to GI.gen. I was looking at the Python docutils. They are interesting, and in theory it shouldn't be too complicated to merge that. So I'm confident that it can happen pretty soon. I honestly want to do a GI.gen release before the GNOME beta. When's the next GNOME beta? So we have a beta on, we have the API feature and UI freezes on February the 12th, which is going to be not this Saturday, not next one. Let me see. Not this one, not next one. The one after that. It's gonna be in 3 weeks' time. So, good. That gives me about, yeah, at the very least a couple of weeks to land a couple of things that I wanted to change in the GI.gen, which should have a good impact on the API references for GTK. So hopefully it's gonna be fine. And then will give me time between the beta release and the actual GNOME 42 release. Which is going to be on March March the 19th. So that gives me about a month to fix potential issues in GI.Gen if I do a release in time for the beta, for the GNOME 42 beta release. That's gonna be fine. Yeah, that should be fine. Yeah, this period of well, not this period of the year, but January and July-ish. No, August. July, August. They're always kind of hectic because people have to start freezing their code and committing all the features that are ready to land in time for the various freezes. I think the new versioning scheme helps a little bit because we have fewer releases that require everyone to stop whatever they're doing, spin up a release and upload it, and then return back to where they were. At least I always found it a little bit too intrusive. The main problem of doing a lot of releases during the development period is that either people stop doing them and just do one, and then they have to resync every time, or they do a lot of small releases, in which case it gets really complicated to stop what they're doing to a release that maybe doesn't have that much inside it. Gets pretty intense. So having fewer releases is usually a little bit better for the development flow. And it's not like a lot of people are using the alpha and beta releases anyway. They were mostly there for downstream packaging purposes, just to test the integration. Everything was released, and every dependency was released at the same time, or at the very least they were all up to date, and building everything wouldn't like fall apart. These days we are a little bit better with that because we build the entire thing every time. So every day we build the entire GNOME, and we check that it actually works. Yeah, we used to do crazy stuff back in the early days. Basically everyone was doing a release whenever they felt like. Did it work? It's fine. People can patch it, right? It's fine. Yeah, I mean, there was a meme at the very beginning of GNOME. Like, GNOME developers were acid victims. Like, doing releases in the downtime between raves. Yeah, well, it was never true, but it kind of captured the fact that the entire thing was pretty slapdash at the very beginning. I mean, we try a lot better now. We try to be responsible adults these days. Yeah, it's not like releasing a complex project is complicated. people always seem to think that GNOME is a single entity, so everyone releases at the same time and using the same schedule, using the same tools, and everything can be released by anybody. And that is definitely not true. We still are very much maintainer oriented, so maintainers do releases whenever they can. And yeah, sometimes stuff breaks. We try really hard not to, but it's inevitable. Stuff sometimes breaks. Yeah, especially considering that we have a ton of what's it called? Ton of libraries, ton of interdependent components, and they are maintained by volunteers. So the end result is that people release whenever they actually can, and whatever they actually can. So it's not entirely impossible to get broken stuff. So let me see. What are we going to be working today? So today I was actually planning on starting the getting started document. So the beginner's tutorials are composed of two parts. The first one is the list of UI components that we've been like hacking on for the past couple of weeks. And that is one part. That is one part that should help people go and figure out how to build their own UIs. But there is another part of the beginner's tutorial, which is the getting started document. And the getting started document has been empty for a while now. And it's been empty because it kind of relies on how do I explain this? It kind of relies on knowing the environment, on how we set up the environment to do development. So theoretically, the entire goal is to take somebody that is not let's say familiar with the GNOME development platform and the GNOME stack. Maybe they're users, maybe they're not users, it's fine. It doesn't really matter. But the overall idea is that they are newcomers. They are not already fluent with the platform. So instead of them looking around for how do I get started with GTK or whatever, I wanted to have something that is how do I get started with developing for GNOME. So how do I set up a GNOME development environment, for instance? So you download GNOME Builder. GNOME Builder does this thing with downloading the SDK and everything else. But once you get there, you also have to explain, well, how do I set up not just my development environment, but how do I set up my application? There are templates, for instance, to follow. Maybe yes, no. There is a lot of information that is currently it's not hidden, because it's you can search for it, but it's not aggregated, if that makes any sense. But I also don't want to do so there are anti-goals at this point. There is the anti-goal of here's how to write an Hello World app in GTK plus libadwaita. I find that kind of example condescending, because it's the usual thing of how do I draw an owl? How do I draw an owl meme? Like, step 1, draw 2 circles. Step 2, draw the rest of the owl. And yeah, every single like coding book, every single coding like programming language book, every single framework book always has this problem where you start with, this is how you like draw an A, and step 2, this is how you write I don't know, William Shakespeare, The Tempest. Oh, hi Gunibert. And it's frustrating. It's annoying and frustrating that that's the case. It's it's a wall that it's like put straight in your face. It makes you feel a little bit stupid as well. So the GTK documentation, for instance, has how to write a GTK application in like 10 steps. And it goes from here's how you do an application, how you set up your application, how you add resources to it, how you add a desktop file, how you add a menus, how you add additional dialogues, and blah blah blah, and that's that. And it's to be fair, it's a good one. The main problem is that it kind of like flies really quickly. It doesn't have any room to breathe, to let you breathe. So it's very breakneck pace. Just here's a window. Let's add, this is a text editor, so let's add a way to search, and let's add preferences, and add like configuration options, and it's a lot to take in. So it needs to basically be taken and slow down like half the speed. But it's also very limited in the sense that it's tied to GTK. So it's not. It also cannot assume you're using any build system, for instance. It cannot assume you're using any platform, though it's heavily implied that you're going to be running it on Linux and the build system is whatever you have. For a GNOME based getting started, I would basically take the same approach, but A, slow down, and B, remove a bunch of assumptions and make them explicit. This is how you set up the project with Mason. This is how you set up the entire thing. This is how you start GNOME Builder and everything else. There are a couple of snags into this plan. The first one being GNOME Builder already has a couple of templates And if we tell people, use this template, it's going to be iffy because templates change. And the other thing that happens is that we also have additional templates here lying around in various languages. Which brings us to the problem of what language do you use if you're doing a getting started documentation? If you use C, you will lose half the readership basically almost immediately. But you also need to say, you also need to explain how Meson works, for instance, how to install Meson, how to use Meson, and everything like that, because C doesn't have a build system. If I decide to use Python, I will probably end up using Meson as well, but because that's what it is. You cannot use, you could use setup tools, but it's not recommended because all the Python build tools are meant to be used for Python libraries or command line tools. So no desktop files, no shared documentation, no desktop settings, no settings schemas, UI files, G resources. So you're gonna be using Meson anyway. And you'll also be using Meson if you're using other languages like Rust. But then for Rust, you also have the complication of having Meson integrate with Cargo. That's why we have an entire tutorial for an entire template for that. So a getting started document that tells you how to build an application for GNOME from scratch. It's kind of problematic in many ways. You can use Cargo Vanilla. Yeah, you can use Cargo Vanilla. Some stuff. So yes, a bunch of application. Some projects use Cargo like as is. They use the build.rs file to generate the resource files and do a bunch of other tricks here and there. And then they use some installer script to install desktop files and ancillary files here and there. You're kind of fighting against it. Fighting against the build system. Because Cargo was not meant for that. It's exactly like Python. I mean, you can use Python's setup tools and install stuff like package config file or man pages or help files or everything else. I do that for GI.docgen. GI.docgen has two build systems. One is setup tools based and the other one is Meson. The Meson one is for using GI.docgen as a sub-project, and I do releases using the setup tools one. But the setup tool one also needs to install a bunch of stuff so that people using GI.docgen from other build systems can effectively use it, like the package config file. The problem is that if you do that, you're fighting the build system. The build system, it's the Linux desktop problem in a nutshell. The Linux desktop is made of a bunch of other things. It's made of ancillary files installed in specific directories, and they can be local to the user and can be global to the system, but they are not managed by the language-specific build tool. Pascal and Lazarus, yes. Or we could use Zig. I'm pretty sure somebody will propose that. But yeah. So the dilemma is that it's represented by this particular issue. Do we write a getting started document on how to get started with GTK and libadwaita inside GNOME, or not? And if we do, How do we do that? And if we don't, what is left? I mean, writing a simple document to go to FlatHub, install GNOME Builder, and then once you are in GNOME Builder, create a new template, a new project using the internal template. But you have to assume that GNOME Builder is new enough that has a GTK4 template, which it's not always the case. Like if I do, let me check. So if I go and start a new project, I can check like language, license, and a template. And you have GNOME application and GNOME application legacy. So if I do a GNOME application with GTK4 and I call it, I don't know, and I do GNOME example app, and I have a pretty decent start. And I can have the build preferences depending on the GNOME platform. Let's use master. And we use the default. Why did the build fail? Oh yeah, because I haven't installed it. That's fine. It should download it. But yeah. So you can see this breaks pretty immediately. Which is kind of annoying. It should install stuff. I should use nightly. Yeah, I should use nightly, but I don't want to use nightly on my development machine. Yes, I know that, but it apparently didn't work. It's 41.3. I honestly expected it would work out of the box. But yeah, I mean, this is a personal fucky-wucky. It's fine. If you install it like from scratch, the build should already work, so it's fine. I don't remember why I uninstalled the local SDK myself, so I honestly don't know. Yeah. Yeah, build succeeded. Done. And you have like 3 warnings and blah blah blah. I'm running it, and you get hello world. Done. So theoretically speaking, this is, well, when do stuff, but yeah, this is the problem. Hi, Teddy Roosevelt. Good name. Very nice name. So that is the problem. It's not using libadwaita, it's using pure GTK. So it's using pure GTK. It doesn't have a template for, at the very least, GNOME Builder 41 doesn't have a template for libadwaita. And yes, yeah, correct. Because again, libadwaita is only in the current unreleased version of the GNOME SDK. As soon as we have GNOME 42, it will be available. And again, that's absolutely fine, and it's not the problem. Adding libadwaita, it's not entirely not hard, and adding it to the template is also not hard. But my main problem is, am I seriously telling people to start writing a GNOME application from a C template? I'm a C developer, and I accept the pain that comes with it. But I'm not entirely sure I want to point people to the default, like GNOME is written C, in that direction, basically. But of course there are like problems with that, with any other option. I mean, if I decide to start a new project and decide in Python, are there templates for everything else? Like if I want to start a JavaScript application for GNOME for GTK4, yeah, I only have the legacy option. Python does seem to support that. NumPy. Yeah, not really. For instance, in this case, if you do this, that is not a great plan. Because that assumes, no, it's fine. If you do this, it's fine. So in theory, a Python application can be done in, okay. Oh yeah, by the way, if people want to contribute to something, they should contribute to GNOME Builder. The templates, for instance, are a great way to start, because it's always useful to do that. Like for instance, adding a JavaScript template for GTK4 based applications, go. It's great. But every other language that has like introspection based should have up-to-date templates. I mean, in theory, I can tell people, yeah, press the language you want, press GNOME application, fill out the details, press create, and it will do its thing. and it's gonna be fine. But of course, that's not entirely accurate. So for instance, let's just start with this because it's easier probably to see it this way. An actual getting started document would need to have documentation on basically every single bit of this. Like, right. So we're subclass in GTK application. That's fine. We are initializing and passing a bunch of properties here. We have to explain what doActivate is and why. It's also not very... I mean, it should have all the doc strings, for instance. Like, for instance, this one is this is fine. Like explaining what doActivate is, for instance. Which is accurate to a point. I mean, this function will be called every time the application gets an action. So if you launch multiple instances of the same application, it will call doActivate on the first one. Yeah, we have a we had this by default, but we didn't add anything else there. So ideally, yeah, we should fix the Python template to add more documentation. But yeah, so this is the problem, right? We're writing documentation. A documentation that is embedded inside the pipeline that goes from I don't know anything about how to write a GNOME application to I just wrote an application. And the documentation does not just live inside text, a complete text that you find on the developer website. It also exists within examples that are used by that text. But it also should exist within examples, within templates that are created by the automated tools that we have at our disposal, like the GNOME Builder templates. Yeah, because again, I mean, I understand that people don't like adding comments to a bunch of code that is, especially the one that is auto-generated, but it's often useful to do this. For instance, in this case, like I understand that if you read it, like GIO resources load, but if you don't understand what it is and what it does, every single class that we generate should have like yeah, essentially what I'm trying to say is that it's not enough to just add the documentation inside a text file, but it's necessary to also add documentation inside the resources that will be used by that documentation. So it's a little bit more complicated than just yeah, it's a little bit more complicated than just writing press this button inside GNOME Builder and then start editing the files. Mostly because then, so if I go back and I go on the, yeah. So it'd be pretty easy to start writing, go on FlatHub, download GNOME Builder, launch it, and then open up, create a new project. Create a project, select the language, select the license, set the name, set the application ID. But you have already a bunch of things that exist in that space that are not communicated correctly. Like, for instance, what's an application ID? Why do I need it? And the application ID is there for a variety of reasons. And then you have to specify that. I mean, we can link to it because we have a tutorial on what's an application ID and why it's needed and what are the rules for choosing it. And it's fairly appropriate to do that, right? So the getting started, when you get to the application ID part, you have to link back to this. But yeah. But yeah, it needs to be clear also when running Builder. Start a new project, application ID will tell you the application ID is a reverse name, domain name identifier used to uniquely identify your application, such as org GNOME Builder. Which is fine. It's a little bit on the technical side. But yeah, maybe, I don't know. I do wonder other platforms, how other platforms start. Like, Jesus. Oh my god. So if you do iOS application development and you go learn the basics of Xcode, SwiftUI, and UIKit to create native apps for iOS. Estimated time 14 hours. But yeah, okay. So these are, yeah, this is how you probably would do this. Yeah. This is how people that have a ton of resources live. This is how the 1% lives. Jesus. But yeah. Okay. Build your first app with Android. Oh man, what the hell is this? Oh, have I become... Damn it. No. Ah. Right. Create an Android project. Yeah. Okay, this is a little bit more on the techie side than the Apple one. Like, Apple has two very different approaches here. One is, how do I start? Well, like writing a bunch of stuff. But very specific, like, how do I create a car view? How do I create, like, do I pass data around? How do I do state management? Custom drawing, recording audio. This is very much task-oriented. Which is... Yeah, it's a high-level view of an application, yes. So you take an application and you basically break it down into what it does. And not just what it does, but also how to achieve every single piece of that application. Which is it's a perfectly reasonable way of doing this. And personally, I would actually recommend it. Because it pushes you towards being consistent, right? With your applications, but also consistent with other applications. Because if everyone does add double cells by following this, this tutorial, for instance, they will do it pretty much the same way, which means all applications that have editable cells will look and behave the same without necessarily creating a class that doesn't let you do anything else. It just pushes you in the right direction without forcing you on without railroading you through the API. Something that we haven't been good at. Most of the time we end up railroading people through our API because we don't have enough documentation. And you have to remember one thing: left to their own devices, programmers will always program. So the only way we found to nudge people in the direction of consistency has been, this is the API you get, this is all you can do, stop like messing about. You can make a mess by doing something completely custom, it's up to you, but if you don't want to, then here's the class that does everything for you, and it's fine. If you follow the API to the letter, you'll be fine. Apple also has that, but mostly I think it's more by it works better by nudging people towards copying what the documentation does and what the documentation exposes you to. And then you have the nerd approach, which is Android. Yeah. I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't say that I feel a slightly more comfortable with the nerd approach, but I'm also not entirely happy with this. I mean, it would be incredibly easy to follow the same approach. You get the instruction of create the application, use the template. These are the files, this is the explanation of each file. I mean, I did it myself. I already did it once. Here. The GL area example for using OpenGL with GTK3, it's literally that approach. Like how to build it, how to run it, and a description of every file, what goes into it, and then every single phase it has a description, and that's it. So I already followed this. It wouldn't be too hard to do this. I'm just not entirely sure that it's the right choice. The main problem with the Apple method is that I don't have an application that I can take apart. I don't have an application that is... Well, that is not entirely true. Like, I have the GTK getting started document application that is a simple, like, very simple text viewer. It has a bunch of moving parts that you can take, and then you can break it up. And instead of following the GTK getting started, where I get the like building blocks one on top of each other until I have a text viewer, I could take the text viewer and like break it apart and show this is what we do for this part, this is what we do for this part. So it would be where is it? Yeah. Right. So aside from the yellow word, we can completely ignore because it's pointless. And the packing example and the custom drawing. Yeah, the building user interfaces. Actually, I should break this into two parts, two documents, because right now it's way too big. Like building applications here. So it starts from empty window, desktop file. Then you start populating the window. You add code to open a file. And then you have a preferences dialog, a menu, like all incrementally one on top of each other. But instead of doing that, we should start from the end and then break it into bits. Say, this is how you do a menu, this is how you do a bind properties. And so on and so forth. What's this? Yeah. And an additional thing that we'd have to do is adding, like instead of using plain GTK, we should include the libadwaita, and we should include stuff that looks a lot like the GNOME interface guidelines, or that follows the GNOME guidelines. Sidebar is, for instance, not this. Adding search, for instance, is another thing that is useful instead. But yeah, there's a ton of stuff here that can be reused, that should be reused. Yeah, we can start from let's see one thing. Yeah. Oh. Let's see. No. I mean, yeah. So, how do we begin? Let's try not to be too cutesy or too, like, colloquial. I mean, I wrote an entire style guide for that. Yeah, I wrote this style. The reason why I wrote this style guide for the GNOME developer documentation is because the usual way of how these things go is a single person writes and reviews every single piece of documentation, so it has a consistent voice. And I don't want that. First of all, because it's a pain. I don't want to be the only person responsible for the GNOME documentation. It's too big of a job for a single person. Also, I might disappear tomorrow, and then the documentation, who's gonna take care of that? Which is why I try to encode how I write the documentation myself, so that other people can look at it and at the very least copy it or follow the the documentation writing style, just like they would do for a coding style. Theoretically, every component in GNOME should follow this. I know that won't be the case because I cannot force anybody to do this, but at the very least, people will be able to read this document, and if they want to ignore it, at least they will ignore it after reading it. So theoretically, this should be not a GNOME application, an application for GNOME desktop environment. Steps. First step is download and install the latest version of GNOME Builder. And we link to... Actually, where do we link? Do we link to Wiki GNOME Apps Builder? Yeah, because it links to the proper places. Yeah. Yeah. When launching it. So, since I have a Builder developer here, when you launch Builder, you will have the welcome and create a new project, right? Or, yeah. In the welcome screen, select create a new project. I don't want to restart it because otherwise I lose everything. This one or this one. Is it called a welcome screen? It's called Start New Project. Yeah. So this one, let's close a couple of them. So we select Start New Project. Okay, so okay. Write your project's name and the and its version ID, and it's gonna be wait, it's gonna be application ID. I never remember. The intralinks are always a pain in the butt. Right, it's gonna be, yeah. This one should be fine. Let's see if it works. Yeah, it works. So I didn't mess up. Yeah. Write the project's name and its application ID. Select the programming language. Select the preferred programming language. Right. Project. And then we select the template. I find this a little bit not great. So you're here, you select everything and you press create project, but you select the template and you have to go back up for the create project. It's not great. It's not great. I have to admit. Yeah, for instance, Android Studio does it slightly differently. So you set up the entire thing, and then you go to the next step. So it doesn't create anything yet. Where is it? Doesn't create anything yet. So once you finished off this, you get into the template phase, and then you can create a project. I think it's a little bit better, because right now it forces you to do this. Like, for instance, let's just say, forces you to do this. You see this, and you create a project, because you don't see, well, you don't immediately notice that there is an entire section underneath the create project here. Yeah, that should be better. I mean, if you notice that there is a scroll bar, yeah, there's a mockup by Alan. Oh, where is it? Should be able to paste the link. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, this is the new mockup. Yeah, yeah, that's already a little bit better. See if I can resize a little bit. Yeah, that's already a little bit better, because the template will be here. Yeah, it's much better. The application ID is only necessary if you choose a template with GTK. That is true. That is true. Well, it's 80% true. If you want to create like even a command line application and you want it to be a service, for instance, you probably want to still have an application ID for the acquiring name on the bus. Like G application technically can be used for command line application as well. To be like quite honest, I would probably not consider command line application with Builder, like as a new project. That is true. Yeah, Flatpak would use it, but Flatpak doesn't really handle non-desktop applications. So if you have a command line application, it's unlikely that you're going to distribute it with Flatpak. But as I was saying, I'm not entirely sure that you want to use Builder for a command line application. Sorry, no, that's not what I meant. I don't think you would go through create a new project for that. If I wanted to do command line application with Builder, I would probably say create a new empty project and then start from scratch there. But it's also true that probably you want to start with the project name and its location. And then once you define those, you switch to a new page and you set up the language license, version control, and the template. And if the template is a GUI application, then also add an application ID instead of making it optional. Because, yeah, right now it's optional, right? So it's optional. If it's optional, it means that you can fill out everything, make a GNOME application, and suddenly application ID is set to none. and you're screwed. Instead, if it's necessary at that point, anything that is not a GUI application is pointless. Yeah, I think there's a little bit too much stuff that has to be set up front in this kind of UI. Something that is more incremental, like a wizard-ish. God, I'm old. Calling it a wizard. But yeah. Yeah. Anyway, we are going here. Select licensing terms. Select the what's it called? All right. Yeah. I don't really like the fact that it's gonna be org.example.org. But yeah, we were saying select GNOME application. And yes, that's pretty much how you start, right? But yeah, as you can see in the Android Studio, you start from a template, and then you add name, app ID, and then you select the language, and you select. That is another thing that it's missing, and we should have it. You select the version of the SDK you want, and then you click finish, and the entire thing gets generated for you. That's probably more interesting. Once builder finishes creating your application, your project, creating your applications, okay, you will find the following files. Yeah, let's start from new project, and we call it example example app. And we start, let's go straight to C for the time being. Then we'll see if we can add Python. So you will find what? Com example GNOME app JSON file. Yeah. No, let's use the actual example. Let's say configure the project instance. GPL 3 plus, and that is the licensing terms for your project. Okay, let's up with this. We can reorganize a little bit. Okay. I don't know if it... No, I don't think it works. Okay. Example GNOME app JSON. Yeah. This is the Flatpak manifest for your application. You can use this manifest to define your project's dependencies. And then we'll have the... What else do we have? The Mason build. Let's also add a link here. This is the Mason build. Which describes how to build your application. Defines what and what to build. Application. Not really. It's not really useful only on the author's machine. It's useful for anybody that clones a project. It's aside from the fact that if you want to push it to FlatHub, you will create a new manifest. Typically, what ends up happening is you copy the development manifest. So what usually happens is that applications, especially in the GNOME space, will have two manifests. One is called org.gnome.whatever.devel.json, which is what is usually done for development. And that one stays in the Git repository, and it's usually then used by anybody who's building the application. And then you have a non-developed version, which is what gets, again, typically copied on FlatHub, for instance, when publishing the application on FlatHub. You should keep the two of them pretty close. The only difference is going to be that the devel version has how's it called, a different suffix or whatever else like that. Let me close a couple of these. Like yeah. Like, for instance, this is the development manifest. And then you copy this without the devel, like without the nightly tag or the prefix for that. Yes. Yes. You will have to modify it. You will have to modify the manifest not to use this. You will have, once you push it somewhere, you will have to modify the URL to not be a file one, but to be a remote Git repository. So yeah, at the beginning it's going to be local here. In theory, we could fix it by saying you're cloning something, or you already have a Git repository for that, in which case you specify the Git repository and the manifest generated will have the Git repository for that location. But yeah, no, that is true. This one should be modified once you push it to a remote repository, not to point to the local directory. Yeah, pre-commit hook, that is also fine. But yeah, I mean, it's entirely possible that people have already a repository somewhere. You define a repository on Git, like for example GitLab or on GitHub. You reserve the name, and then you create a project. You insert the name of the insert the URL of that repository, and it's all done. But I also would expect this to happen once Builder gets more integrated with Git. Like, for instance, being able to like push something directly to Git. You modify this as the last step, and then you push directly from the UI. That's one option. That is not entirely true, because everything is cached. So if you have something local, then you don't strictly need to push that. The point of the manifest is not to make it easy to build locally. It makes it easy to build. It makes it easy to not having to deal with dependencies and stuff. It's mostly meant to be able for you to be able to build stuff directly. Which means in some cases, yes, pushing to remote. is another option. I don't know, it's kind of there are many ways to skin this cat, if we want to be blunt about it. The manifest is useful for not just locally, it's useful for anybody that deals with this. But again, GNOME Builder doesn't pull from a remote when building. It will build everything up to your module. Then it would stop, build whatever is in your current project directory on top of that. So even if you have if you have changes or anything, it will not pull from Git. So that is not important. That is not how it works. At the very least, for your own module. There is literally no difference if it goes in build docs or not. I put everything in build docs because I'm more comfortable with not having a ton of stuff in the root directory. But we used to have them in the root directory because we had an automated build service for GNOME that will literally clone a bunch of stuff and find the manifest for Flatpak, and then publish the build on the nightly web server. But that was like 4 years ago, whatever. These days it's a lot less important. Okay, so yeah, we need to break down the directory structure a little bit. So, right. The G resource is kind of important. Source example. Map B resource XML. Resource manifest for assets that have to will be built into the project. And this one is going to be a link to G resource. Gonna be docs VIO. And it's going to be resource. And that's one. Then we have what other places? Yeah. This one is list of files containing translatable strings. Translatable user visible strings. This file will be processed by get text. We have a guideline for translatable for localization. Yeah. So let's do this here. It's gonna be guidelines localization. Yes. No, let's add, yeah. Main scene. The main entry point of your application. Then we're gonna have the yeah, example GNOME app application. The application single plus window. Main window application. The UI definition file for the main window application. What else? The data. Yeah. So example app. This is important. Schema. The schema of the application settings. For the settings of the application. And this is going to link to G settings. So we have that. The desktop entry file for the application. And for that, we need to link to the, wait, do we have a desktop file? We have an tutorial on how to integrate the application. Yeah, we should have a tutorial on how to integrate in our application. And should mention desktop files. Yes. So it's going to be integrating with GNOME guidelines maintainer integrating. And then we have the app data. And this one needs a link or not? Oh, we don't have application data. We should definitely add a bit on the application data file. Otherwise, it's not going to be useful. Okay. Okay. So this is an initial, like, right. Your application is if you want to, you can build and run the application. By pressing the it's gonna be like or and that should be a rough start. Let's just see. It's source tutorials beginners getting started. Okay. Uh-huh. And now let's rebase. Okay. Right. So we have an initial build that we can check. So let's see how it renders. Then we'll have to start taking screenshots of the UI so that we can follow along. Like here. So yeah, if it's full screen, it's easier to. Actually, it's yeah, and then we can take that. Okay, the build has finished. Documentation, tutorials, beginners. Yeah. We probably need to rename it not play but run. Because this is how it will appear in like accessibility tools. But yeah. And yeah, we will have a screenshot here. And then we have a screenshot of this. We can close this one so it doesn't appear. We're mentioning this stuff here. So it's gonna be here, here, here. Yeah, something like this. So I can take a screenshot of this. And it should be good enough for a first run. So source img tutorials. Would be a lot easier if I knew where the screenshot was. Okay. I really want the new screenshot UI for GNOME Shell. Right. So we rename it. It started. New project. And then we also create a new screenshot, rename the screenshot. And this one is going to be getting started. Project. So, getting started. Yep. Copy them here. Then we have to go here in the it's not going to be that way. It's going to be source image tutorials. Getting started PNG. Right. Well, everything has to be licensed, otherwise we're it's gonna be a problem. Whoa. Okay. So it's gonna be right here. It's gonna be source tutorials, beginners. Okay. MG. Getting started a new project. MG. And this one, it's going to be image. Getting started. Project files. And let's see what happens when we do this. It's probably gonna be a little bit of a mess. We'll have to resize the images. I might need to resize the images. Let's close this. Let's close this. Right. Yeah, I might have to resize the images because I took them at 1080p, and that might mess up the entire the layout of the entire web page. But yeah, in theory, we should have a little bit more ease after that. Because once we add this, like this is what you get as soon as you start. This is what hits you in the face as soon as you get to the project. But after that, the idea is to start taking the getting started page from the GTK documentation and augment it with libadwaita widgets instead of using pure GTK4. Okay. Documentation, tutorials, beginners, getting started. Yeah. No, the template is fine. It survived. Yeah. So that's good. That's a good start. Ideally, the next version of Builder will have libadwaita templates, so we won't have to do a lot of changes here and there. And yeah, I need to write the application data file, the tutorial about that kind of file. Theme. Yeah. Yeah. Writing the tutorial on how to write application data files is going to be fun because it's something that I personally hate. But it will need to be done. And this one I could link to the GTK documentation. I could link to the beginner's tutorial, the window component. That would actually make sense. So I could do this. That would work. So you get like parachuted straight into the UI components. And with this one instead, UI definition should be a link to the GTK. Documentation. That would make sense. Right. Yeah, the application data stuff is gonna be info Let's link to the documentation there, even though I'm not. A huge fan. Yeah. Not a huge fan, but it's a start. And then as soon as I can, I will write the application metadata section in our integration guidelines. And I will link to that. The main problem with the upstream documentation and specification is that the spec says stuff, but it's not exactly what the validation tool validates. So you write stuff that is theoretically conformant to the spec, but then you run the validation tool and the validation tool will punch you in the face. And then you fix it. Okay, you fix it. And then you are confronted with the fact that that FlatHub, for instance, uses a different set of validation rules for the same data, and they do not match. I think it's been fixed, but it takes forever. So sometimes you have the metadata that is perfectly fine on your CI pipeline because you're running the validation tool, and then you push it to FlatHub, and FlatHub will just say, "No, I'm sorry, you're an idiot." The problem is it doesn't tell you what it wants and what is broken, what are the rules for anything, what should be placed inside the metadata if it's invalid. What is valid? So, rule of advice: if you ever write a specification of any kind, specify what is valid and what is invalid. And also, write the validation tool first. Otherwise, I will find you. I might have to introduce you to a pinball hammer. Yeah. Okay, so let's push it again. And we should have an actual build. At the very least, an initial build of the entire thing, and we will be able to add more steps here. Like adding code to, I don't know, modify the main window, add a menu, anything else. But for some stuff, I will probably wait until we have the corresponding page in the UI element. Like the UI component section. For instance, if I want to add, if I'm going to add a menu to the getting started like application, I will have to write the menu page for the component. Like here, I will have to add a menu. Or a menu button here. Yeah. I will have to add a menu section, how to define a menu, and blah, blah, blah. And then from the getting started, a link to that. And then yeah, this is text area, GTK text view. Okay. Come on. Yeah. Yeah, now it makes sense. I should make the links correctly and the main window. So we link here and we go. here. Yeah, we need to need to remove this. And also need to fix the style for this. Well, fix the style is incorrect. I will have to ask Jakub to fix the style. But yeah, theoretically, we could even do this. Actually, we could do this, take a screenshot of this, and use this as the app. The main problem is that the style doesn't match. Oh, we could do it. So maybe... God, how many screenshots do I have? Jesus. Yeah, this one is fine. Mm-hmm. Buffer. Mm-hmm. From this decade. Right. Yeah, a little bit of change there, but not hugely important. And yeah, once we have libadwaita everywhere, then we can take the new screenshots. Yeah, the main problem is always having screenshots that match the actual result. Because that's always painful. It's always painful going through documentation and the style is from like 5-10 years ago and doesn't match at all what you get these days. mean, like until last year, you would go here and you get like stuff like this. I mean, this stuff. When was last time that GNOME had like minimize, maximize, and close? Or resize grip that covered the actual button. Oh, what the hell is this? My God, what the hell? What the hell? Oh, go away. So this is the kind of stuff that we used to have. Yeah, you can see how we should not write these examples. So you get a ton of code, like a wall of code, and then line numbers, and then comments inside it. But then you also have explanations for lines 1 to 4, all of this. This is not really, it's not really good. Like, you have comments. You can use comments, you know? You don't need to write comments out of band. Oh, come on. Come on, GitLab, I know you can do it. Right. Yeah, it's a little bit better. We'll have to modify the example so that it doesn't... It looks like this. But theoretically, it should be fine. Anyway, okay, we are fine with that. So let's get this in so we can start iterating over it. Yeah, I don't like this stuff sitting in merge requests for ages. If we can iterate over it, it's fine. Yeah. Hopefully we'll get more contributors there. So, oh, 2.5 hours. Let's go back. Let's go back to the beginning. So, yeah, today has been more groundwork, more like, yeah, breaking the ground for the getting started documentation. Ideally, this should give us an initial framework or an initial frame of reference in order to get to the more technical content, let's just say. But still already explaining what all the pieces are when you create a new project from the template should help people that are completely new to the platform. And if you're not completely new to the platform, then at least you know how all the pieces fit together. But yeah, it's just the beginning. We need a little bit more than that. And yeah, starting from the GTK getting started application, but not having to explain what Meson is, or not having to explain precisely how to modify files or anything. It's gonna help us a little bit more, because that's usually where GTK getting started or tutorials just stop you in your tracks. Mostly because you cannot assume anything about any skill from the that the reader might have, which is always painful because it makes writing documentation so incredibly hard. Well, it makes writing documentation hard for us that write documentation, but also makes it incredibly hard for people reading that, because you have no idea up until you already hit the entire documentation. Like you already hit the web page and started reading what you can skip, what part of it are implied, or what parts of it are just bringing everyone up to speed. Whereas I want the documentation for developers to be you can read like 5% with the solution, or you can read 50% with the solution and a bit of context, and you can read 95% with the solution and the entire context. But as soon as you found your solution, as soon as you found the answer to your question, then you can just stop and move on. You don't have to read the entire thing, and especially you don't have to read the entire thing from the beginning to get to the solution that you are looking for. We are trying to solve the problems that people have, not trying to teach them how computers work. That's not for us. Yeah, I think this is a good place to stop for today. On the not tomorrow, but the day after, so Wednesday, I'll try and finish. Well, I'll try to add a new section to that, or we can probably look at the UI components list and add more sections there. I want to add a section on the menus, especially if you want to if the getting started document have to explain how menus work. So that one, and add a bunch of other smaller UI elements. Yeah, the header bar plus menu button is usually a complex thing, but we already have menus and actions as separate tutorials, so we don't have to write that information. We can directly link to that. Probably needs to be cleaned up a little bit, and we need more examples in that section. They're not just C and Python. Well, no, they're not just plain C. We'll probably need to have a more structured set of examples, like we do for the various UI components, because the documentation on actions and menus was written for the old documentation website, so it doesn't have all the niceties that we have today. So we'll have to fix that. And then, yeah, I'm not gonna plan anything on Friday. We'll probably just play it by ear. Either do some coding on GI.gen or go back to the tagged entry for libad weiter, because I wanted to finish that. I had a look at it. Off stream I wrote some more code on that, but it's not finished. It's not ready to review yet, but hopefully it will be on Friday, and we'll see what happens there. I don't expect it to land immediately, but I want to go and iterate over it with the design team first, so to see if more people want it, because right now there are at least 2 or 3 projects that use something like that particular kind of code, and they are willing to port to GTK4. So instead of doing that, having it in libad weiter might work better for them. But yeah, this is my plan for the week. So if you are still with me right now, thank you very much for listening to me rambling on for 2.5 hours. If you're watching this on YouTube, then I do streams on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday about writing GNOME documentation and GNOME code. And if you want to follow me on Twitch, so you can get notified as soon as I start streaming. Otherwise, you can subscribe to my GNOME channel on YouTube and watch the VODs that I usually publish the day after the stream ends. So for everyone else, have a great rest of the day, and I shall see you on Wednesday. Bye.